I'm super excited, super proud of how well as an offense we've adapted. It's been great working with the new staff. And then, you start to see the ins and outs. We start to form our own identity and just the way we've come together. I think we're really hungry. I have a lot that, we want to improve at, we want to get better at, and we kind of all have that buy-in and we all have that chip on our shoulder. So
the Carolina Panthers are coming off of a pretty disappointing and embarrassing 2023 season, one in which the team finished 2-15 and only had a handful of truly competitive games start to finish. And to make matters worse, the Panthers did not own their own first-round pick, so they kind of suffered through one of the worst seasons in franchise history for nothing. Although last season was truly a disaster for Carolina, I'm fairly optimistic about their future after numerous moves this offseason to infuse the roster with more talent and surround their second-year quarterback Bryce Young. And ultimately, I think that's the biggest difference between the Carolina Panthers offseason last year and then this year. It felt like last offseason, the Panthers really overvalued their own roster talent that they had, how quickly of a transition Bryce Young would be able to make from the college level to the NFL, and even the effectiveness of the coaching staff led by head coach Frank Reich, who didn't even make it to the end of the season. And the reason for that, I think you have to go all the way back to the 2022 season when the Panthers were filtering out quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield and PJ Walker and Sam Darnold. They were sitting at 2-7, and the interim head coach Steve Wilkes really lit a fire under the team, and they found themselves in a position at 6-9 heading into week number 17 at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Tom Brady. And that was essentially a playoff game, because if the Carolina Panthers won that game, they had a great chance to lock up the NFC South Division title. Now, ultimately, that would not happen. The Panthers would lose by 6 points as Mike Evans had a monster day. But I think what that win streak did towards the end of the season was give some false hope and belief to the organization that the team was actually closer to competing than they really were. And to take it a step further, I mean, just look at their signings last offseason. Players like Adam Thielen and DJ Chark and Miles Sanders. So despite only winning 7 games and being pretty fortunate to win that many in the first place, they got pretty stagnant with the roster. And you could debate that it was even worse than it was the prior year because DJ Moore was gone because of the Bryce Young trade. Deontay Foreman, the team's leading rusher who had a great end of the season, he was gone in free agency as well. So my point being, I just think the end of the 2022 season really messed up the Panthers last year. But the way that you can look at it now is maybe it was a good thing for the 2024 Panthers because a lot of the flaws on the team last year really got exposed. And the new regime that was brought in, Dave Canales, former offensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Dan Morgan, who has been with the organization for several years now, really just simplified things and had one real objective, and it was surround Bryce Young, and we're going to see really what he's made of this year. And it really started with the offensive line. The Panthers brought in 2 new offensive guards, starting with Damian Lewis from the Seattle Seahawks on a 4-year, $53 million contract with $26.2 guaranteed, and then Robert Hunt, who got a 5-year, $100 million contract with $63 million guaranteed. So 2 brand new offensive guards for an offensive line that was pretty bad last year, one of the worst in the league. And why this is so important is because when you have a smaller quarterback, the worst type of pressure that they can face is right up the middle. And Bryce Young, who is the smallest quarterback in the NFL currently, he needs to have a good pocket in front of him if he is going to succeed and reach his potential. So bolstering up that unit is obviously a great idea from Dan Morgan. And while it does protect Bryce Young and give him a pocket to throw in, it also helps improve the run game, which Dave Canales really wants to implement into the offense this season. The Panthers ranked 20th in the league last year with 104 rush yards per game. A big thing in Canales' scheme is play action, and you cannot effectively run that if your running game is not good. Then after getting 2 new starters on the offensive line, they also went out and got a true X wide receiver in Deontay Johnson from the Pittsburgh Steelers. They only had to give up cornerback Dante Jackson in a pick swap, and as I'm going to keep referring to this entire video, this entire offseason was just about surrounding Bryce Young. I don't think many teams would love to get rid of their solid cornerback too, but for the Panthers situation, I think getting Johnson was a fantastic move. Johnson is still in his prime at 27 years old and really broke out in 2021. He had over 100 catches, over 1,100 yards, and 8 touchdowns. And after that season, many people thought, hey, he might be the next elite wide receiver in the league. And since then, he's stagnated a little bit, but I think the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback situation has not been super good with Kenny Pickett the last 2 years. I think Deontay Johnson's role in this offense is going to be what Chris Godwin did for Canales and Tampa Bay last year. Just a great route runner and somebody that's effective after the catch. The Panthers did not have many plays last year, but wide receiver breaking a couple of tackles and picking up a first down, that is something that is definitely going to improve now that Johnson is a part of the team. But Carolina was not done adding to the offense. We head to the NFL draft, and the Panthers spent their first 2 picks on the offensive side of the ball as well. Starting off with Xavier Legette out of South Carolina with the last pick in the first round. Legette is a very intriguing prospect. He's also a physical freak, over 6'1", 220 pounds, and ran a 4.39 40-yard dash. He was one of the best deep threats in the country last season for South Carolina. He had 10 catches of 30+ air yards, which was second most in the FBS, while the Panthers only had 1 reception on throws of 30+ air yards last season. So you can see see the appeal of bringing in somebody that has Legette's physical characteristics and his play style, and he will bring another element to this offense that we did not see last year for the Carolina Panthers, which is somebody that's just going to be able to make tough contested catches and just bail Bryce Young out every once in a while. So after those 2 wide receiver additions, I think the Carolina Panthers receiving core is much better than it was last year. You've got your top 2 guys in Johnson and Legette. I think Adam Thielen is still serviceable and reliable to play the slot position. And then behind them, you have Jonathan Mingo and Terrence Marshall Jr., 2 young guys that really haven't found their way yet. We'll see if they can develop it all and pick up a role for this offense. But then you go to the second round of the draft, and the Panthers selected one of my favorite players in the entire draft, Jonathan Brooks, a running back out of Texas. And the only thing you need to know about him is that he's a very dynamic and explosive player. The Panthers do have 2 solid running backs already in Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, but Jonathan Brooks, I do think, has a way higher ceiling than both of those guys. I don't know how early we will see Brooks because he is recovering from an ACL injury, and I think that injury was a big reason why he was available in the second round. But nonetheless, the Panthers are super excited to get him to their offense. And the last major move they made on the offensive side of the ball was getting Jatavion Sanders, a tight end, yet another player from Texas. And Sanders was another guy that I really thought could have gone a lot higher than this. I saw a ton of mock drafts and a lot of people scouting him as a second round prospect, but he didn't grade super well at the NFL Combine. His metrics were not super good, and we know how that can impact a player's stock, so I do think that is probably why he did fall to day number 3. But he's a guy that has great hands and yet another yards after the catch threat. If you go watch his Texas tape, you will see multiple one-hand snags, him jumping up and high pointing the pass against defenders. I really do like this selection and think it might end up as one of the best value picks of this entire draft. So overall, offensively, I think the Panthers organization did an amazing job this offseason just overhauling that unit. It's really night and day when you just compare the athletes that were on this roster in 2023 versus now, and I think quarterback Bryce Young is going to reap the benefits of that. Look, if you've been following the channel for a while now, you know that I was not super high on Bryce Young during the draft process last year. To put it into simple terms, I do not like banking on historic outliers, and Bryce Young at his size becoming an elite player would be a huge outlier. But with that said, I think last year was a complete wasted season. I look back to Trevor Lawrence in 2021 with Urban Meyer and that clown show. That entire season was pretty much a waste of time. And I feel the same way about Bryce. He definitely did not have a chance to succeed last year. He was one of the highest rated prospects ever out of high school for a reason. He was a Heisman Trophy winner and the #1 overall pick as well for a reason. He has some talent. And while I'm somebody that does have some questions if that talent is good enough to be a top tier quarterback, he's got the chance next year and the rest of his career to prove me and everybody else wrong. And what I will say about the Panthers organization is they're going to find out pretty early on whether or not Bryce Young can play or not. His supporting cast is now more than good enough to succeed with. I think Dave Canales has a good offensive mind. We saw we got out of Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. It's time for Bryce to show why he was the #1 overall pick. And as a team, I see the Panthers as a 5 to 7 win squad next year. I think the offense is going to be much better, but I expect the defense to take a step back. I already mentioned their loss of Dante Jackson, but they also traded away Brian Burns, their best pass rusher the last several years, to the New York Giants. 2 other starters and Frankie Louvu and Jeremy Chin also left in free agency. So there was a lot of overhaul on that unit this year, but getting some veterans like Josie Jewell and Jadeveon Clowney and Dane Jackson, I think still should have this defense being pretty solid. Ultimately, I think it comes down to JC Horn staying healthy. When he's been on the field, he's looked like a star, but the thing is he just rarely ever is. And if he goes down and it's just Dane Jackson and Troy Hill at the cornerback position, that is where the defense could run into some issues. But going back to the theme of this video, I don't think the Panthers mind if their defense takes a big step back next year if their offense and second-year quarterback Bryce Young take a massive step forward next year. And although it should have been that way from the beginning, I'm just glad the Panthers organization figured it out before Bryce Young reaches a point of no return. But I want to know what you think about the Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young and what you expect from them in 2024. Do you think Bryce will break out this year and show everybody why he deserved to be the first overall pick? Or do you still have some questions about him and the team being successful next year? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But subscribe to the channel if you are new, drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.